I want to welcome you to the second in a series of League of Women Voters Candidates Forums. My name is Karen Schwartz. I'm the president of our local league. And I would like to cover some housekeeping details before we begin. Bathrooms around the corridor outside and to my left. Should we need to evacuate, the shortest way out is through those doors, but you can also use these. Cell phones, please silence your cell phone now. I want to welcome you on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County. The League is a political organization dedicated to informed voting and education of voters. We are nonpartisan. We do not support any candidate or political party. We do study issues and advocate for issues that we feel are important. Sometimes we support ballot initiative positions. But tonight you will be hearing nonpartisan presentation of responses to questions that you have developed and that have been developed by our media representatives who will be introduced in a moment. Tonight's meeting is a result of planning by our voter service chair, Ruth Schwartz, and her wonderful committee of League of Women Voter members. Thank you, Ruth. And our moderator is Polly Basich, and she will be describing the rules and procedures for tonight's meeting and how we'll proceed. We will be passing out some cards for questions, and after you've written your question, merely hold it in the air and a league member will come by and collect it. And it will be presented, minus any duplications, to our moderator for presentation to our candidates. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, good evening. We have supervisor candidates here tonight, and they're seated right up there in front of you. From District 1, we have three candidates for District 1. First of all, there's the incumbent, Nate Beeson, Al Bluff, and Sue Mcguire. From District 5, we have Richard Anderson. And I really have to explain because this is somewhat of a deviation from our normal forum. Normally, we do not have a forum where we don't have all candidates represented. In this case, we had already invited the people from District 5 who happened to both be from Truckee, and the other candidate withdrew. So currently, Richard Anderson is the only candidate from Truckee. But since he was already accepted for the forum, we felt that it was a good opportunity for the people in Western Nevada County to meet him and hear from him, since normally, you know, his career has really been in the Truckee area. For District 2, we have Jedediah Bianji. Now, Jedediah is actually a write-in candidate and just qualified within the last week or so. Again, we had not scheduled a District 2 forum because Ed Schofield was running unopposed. And Ed Schofield is an incumbent, and so is a known quantity to the people in this area. We notified him of Mr. Bianji's qualifications as a write-in candidate, but Ed had made a previous commitment that he felt he couldn't walk out on. So he did send me a little statement. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because this is something we normally do not have candidates up here who don't have their opposition, you know, with them. Ed Schofield's statement is as follows. Due to the late entry by my opponent as a write-in candidate, I am unable to attend the League of Women Voters candidate debate scheduled for April 30th. Initially, I was not invited to participate in the forum since I was running unopposed. It was not until this past week that my opponent was declared a certified write-in candidate. In the meantime, working with my county planning team, a meeting was organized with homeowners of the three associations whose properties are part of the immigrant trail. A large turnout is expected, and I feel it's my duty to represent my South County constituents at this meeting. I have great respect for the League of Women Voters and normally would never turn down an invitation to participate. Thank you, Mr. Schofield. Thank you for your understanding. If you have any questions, you may contact me and so on. So that's why Ed Schofield is not here tonight. So, being that taken care of, let me explain what the ground rules are here. The candidates will speak on a rotational basis. They drew to determine the order of their opening statements, and they're seated in the order, the way it came out. The order for the closing statements, if number 1 is the opening statements, he will be number 5 for the closing statements. It's just the reverse. They will have 2 minutes for opening statements, followed by questions from the media and the audience. They will have 1.5 minutes to answer the question, and they may request an additional 30 seconds if they feel they would like to rebut something that has been said by another person. If they do, then the other person, any candidate can request an additional time. But if he does, everyone can request an additional time. The point is everyone gets equal time. They will have 1.5 minutes for their closing statements. And finally, before we begin, if you're so moved, please do not applause during the program, because we're really kind of pressed for time here, and we want to make sure everybody has their time. So we want as much time possible for questions. Now, we do have some media representatives here tonight, and I'd like to introduce those people. From KNCO, we have Rita Stevens. KVMR, Paul Emery. The Union, Matt Renda. And Yubanet Pasquale. So with that, I guess I should also we have timekeepers, and the timing has been explained to our candidates here, and the 2 timekeepers are sitting right here, and they have signs, and they will hold up the sign when they have 30 seconds left, and they will also hold up the time when their time is up. Now, if they are in the middle of a sentence, they may finish the sentence, as long as it's not compound and complex. You know. All right. Then we have 2 ladies from the League of Women Voters that are going to be looking at the questions and collecting them. Helen Williamson back there. If you have a card and hold it up, Helen will pick this up. Jan Kaufman over here will be looking through the questions and giving them to me. This is just really to give them, so we avoid the duplication of questions. And speaking of questions, I have another one little thing to say. When you write your question, now these people are all running for a county office. And so when you write your questions, do not write a personal question to Mr. Beeson or a personal question to Ms. Mcguire. You write a question in general that you would like all of the candidates to respond to. So that's important, because if you write a personal question to one of them, it doesn't really have much meaning for any of the other 4. So with that, we will start. Mr. Beeson, you're number 1, so you will start with your opening statements.
Well, good evening, and thanks to the League for sponsoring this event. I always look forward to it every time I'm running. The economic and fiscal uncertainty in California will most likely persist for a few more years, and it could have profound impact on local governments, as it always does if it's not going well. I believe that I've got I'm the candidate who has the necessary leadership skills and experience to manage such an environment. I've helped Nevada County through various challenges, and the results speak for themselves: financial stability, a prudent budget reserve, and efficient delivery of services in difficult times as well as good ones. As an advocate for Nevada County and Sacramento, I've been successful in minimizing the impact of overreaching wastewater treatment regulations and in pushing back against unnecessary and expensive septic system regulations that are proposed. And I continue to battle against the governor's proposed unfair fire tax on rural areas. Also, my leadership position at the Regional Council of Rural Counties will give Nevada County a stronger voice in rural affairs going forward. And speaking of looking ahead, my top priority is continuing the county's current state of good fiscal health. We can't do anything without that. In other areas, I'll continue my support of the Economic Resource Council and its efforts to create jobs. We're going to complete a new broadband project in the next year, and this will allow local providers to connect and expand their networks, cut their costs, and possibly provide alternatives for local customers. We're going to move forward and relocate the county equipment yard down on Dog Bar, which will give us more efficiencies, and we hope to partner with Grass Valley. And an added bonus is we're going to free up the current site for commercial or industrial development, which we hope will give a little shot to our economy. We're starting to grow back the library hours very, very gradually, and I want to continue that because I know how important they are, particularly in the 1st District. I think we have the highest proportion of library hours. And I'll continue to seek additional safety improvements on Highway 49. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bianji?
Hi, my name is Jedediah Bianji, and I'm running for District 2 as a write-in for Nevada County Supervisor. District 2 is Altair and the Lake of the Pines communities and the Highway 49 corridor running towards Auburn, stopping at Bear River. I'm running a campaign that's about empowering our county by asserting our inalienable right to local self-governance. I have 3 primary topics to help accomplish this. 1, defending our community against big government and big corporate control, both of which use their powers to usurp our rights to local self-governance. There are multiple avenues we can use to pursue this, from an ordinance to supporting a constitutional sheriff. 2, I would like to create or form a Nevada County public bank modeled off of the Bank of North Dakota, which is a state-run bank where they invest their government funds into the state bank and do not pay any fees or have any percentages siphoned off onto the Wall Street banking system. The system also encourages growth in business investment and provides financial stability when hard times hit. Currently, North Dakota has 3% unemployment and in a growing economy. I think that we could institute a public bank here and reap a lot of those rewards. Also, in any infrastructure we may pursue, we would save money there, up to 40% of the cost of the actual project. 3, I would like to initiate a foreclosure moratorium. Since 2008, approximately 4,000 homes have been foreclosed upon in our county. If we do a little math, that could be 4 people per home, and that would equate to about 16% of our population having been affected of foreclosure in our county. As we have learned in audits, that 84% of these foreclosures are in fact have 1 illegal act, and 66% have in fact up to 4 illegal acts in these foreclosures. So,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bianchi. Number 3, Mr. Richard Anderson from District 5.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you to the League for holding this forum, and thank you for being here, by the way. I'm Richard Anderson. I'm running for District 5 Supervisor so that Truckee and our unincorporated neighbors will retain effective representation on the Nevada County Board of Supervisors. If elected, I will uphold the principles of good government that have guided me for more than 7 years on Truckee's Town Council. I have 6 priorities which I've listed here, and they're actually kind of boring, but they're important though, so I'm going to read them off to you. The first is provide county services in a fiscally responsible, fair, and efficient manner. Number 2, seek innovative, cost-effective solutions and leverage service delivery with nonprofits, businesses, schools, churches, labor groups, and other community partners. That is, get the most bang for the buck. Number 3, protect the recreational, natural, scenic, and historical assets that are the foundation of our economic well-being and that are the reasons why many of us came to Nevada County in the first place. Number 4, create prosperity by improving opportunities for business success and job creation. Number 5, transform our county library system to meet the demands of a growing region in an era when information technology is evolving. And number 6, work cooperatively with Nevada County's other supervisors and elected officials. My service on Truckee's Town Council has given me invaluable experience in working both collaboratively and effectively to advance the public's interests and in making the difficult trade-offs necessary to balance the town's budget every year. I'll also add, though, that that much of my childhood was spent in small towns. I grew up in a town of less than 200 people on the west slope of the Sierra, down in Tuolumne County, and I like to think that that small towns are in my DNA. I will bring to the Board of Supervisors a sincere willingness to listen, an informed perspective, and a proven ability to treat all sides of an issue with an open mind and an even hand. I look forward to 4 years of service in addressing your concerns. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next is Al Bluff, who is a candidate for District 1.
It's Al Bluff. Bluff.
Bluff.
My father would. Anyway, my name's Al Bluff.
A name like
and,
Bassage, I can't be, I'm very sensitive to last names. So
Oh,
I'm
okay.
truly sorry.
Yeah, my name's Al Bluff, and my background is I got my training in the nuclear Navy. I worked in a nuclear power plant for 29 years, doing everything from public relations to the last 12 years I was there, environmental surveillance, where I also helped monitor water quality. I also, at the same time, was involved in creating light rail in Sacramento, the Capital Corridor, the ACE trains in San Joaquin County, and 2 years ago worked on the start for the SMART in Marin and Sonoma County. I'm a firm believer in mass transit. I don't believe, if I become supervisor, if I have the honor of doing that, I will make sure there are no more lanes added to Highway 49, because it is ridiculous to have our smog keep going up and up, particularly when we have temperature inversions up here, and keep adding lanes to Highway 49 under the guise of safety. We need a backup system. We need good public transportation. We also need to be separate from outside resources as far as energy. I'm promoting a biomass power plant that will also make biodiesel, as well as a good rail system, and upgrading our bus system to what my father was used to in Europe, what they call postal buses, where you can deliver mail and also packages and that. We need to reorganize our society and to be more independent from these outside resources that are making us lose our independence. And that's my big aim, is to make a self-sustaining society up here. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last is Sue Mcguire, who is a candidate for District 1.
Thank you. The bottom line is that county policies must promote a healthy local economy. County government services require taxes produced by the private sector business, and residents in Nevada County need jobs locally. As your supervisor, I will promote a jobs and economic development first policy. Any matter that comes before the board will first be viewed in light of its impact on job creators. Number two, I will review regulations and code enforcement policies to identify, eliminate, or change those which are unduly burdensome to homeowners and businesses. And I will seek to eliminate or reduce permit fees to the same ends. Number three, I will seek transparency in all fiscal matters. That means full public disclosure of not only expenditures of the county, but obligations of the county. I will acknowledge departments demonstrating fiscal responsibility. I will have an open door policy and an open mind. I will not be dismissive of the public's creative ideas, and will seek input from the public as well as county staff. Number four, my background. I'm a lifelong native of Nevada County with 6 generations of family in this county. That's 50 plus years, I'll just say 54. My experience, I attended Nevada County schools. I put myself through law school at night. I have worked here for nearly 40 years, 20 of those years in the private and public sectors as an employee, and another nearly 20 years as a self-employed attorney. As an attorney, I feel that I can certainly prevent and evaluate lawsuits against the county by asking the appropriate questions that will benefit the board and ultimately save taxpayers money. I believe I'm uniquely qualified to represent you on the board and I would appreciate your vote in June. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now start the questioning. We're going to start with the media, and we're going to just alternate. Now, in the rotational basis, the first person to answer in this instance will be Jedediah Bianji, and then we'll rotate, and so none of them will be always the first or always the last. We're going to keep it going that way. So we'll start with the media, and Pasquale from UBNet, you have the first opportunity for a question.
Thank you very much, Polly. Good evening, everybody. Would you please describe what, in your opinion, are the challenges for your district that are different from the rest of Nevada County? What are the challenges specific to your district?
Jedediah, you start with that.
Well, specifically in my district, we have well, it's been going down. It's actually affecting the whole county, but driven from our district was a medical marijuana grow that was grown in basically in the community and neighborhood. So our district is specifically concerned with perhaps setting up some sort of and wanting regulations that would be a way to enforce a good neighbor policy, basically, in the acquisition of medical marijuana. I think that would be a specific thing that is concerned by that district. There's an ordinance right now that's coming up that is being worked on right now to actually address that the county supervisors are working on. Having been part of that panel that was supposed to be giving the citizen input, I actually don't support the current ordinance that's coming forward, but would like to see it in fact brought forward to the public again and have it reworked over. I worked with across the board support with a number of citizens to find and write something that would actually work. I think that it's important to find something that will maintain and sustain itself, respecting our current state law and uphold under any court challenge that should happen to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thanks very much. 3 challenges specific to District 5 come to mind. The first one is snow. And I'm not being facetious. It actually is a serious concern, especially when you consider that snow closes many roads in our district across the course of a winter. And especially within the county area, within the unincorporated area, those roads are often not plowed on a regular basis, if at all. So that's one of the first concerns. The second is our distance from the county seat. It's roughly an hour's drive from Truckee. It's even longer from the small towns like Florissant and Hurstdale. And this is an issue if you're trying to pull a building permit, for example. So simply the distance of the travel time to get to Nevada City is of concern. And of course, that travel time can be extended dramatically again with snow. And the third, in some ways, the west side and east side economies are similar, but our economy on the east side, I'd say, is far more heavily based upon recreation and tourism than western Nevada County, and which necessitates attention to the environment and attention to the sorts of things that bring people to our community or to our communities and to the rural areas around Truckee, which is, of course, the forests, the lakes, the streams, the historical character of Truckee itself and any other small towns in the area. But offhand, those I would say are 3 primary differences between my district and the other districts.
Thank you. Al Balls.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I see that one of the biggest things in District 1 is unemployment, vacant shops, and, of course, the marijuana problem. That's why I'm promoting this rail and biomass, and to put people to work. I think people need to go to work. And my father was from northern Italy, and he always told my brother and I there's honor in work. And when we got up from San Francisco, and I was 10, and my brother was 8, we had a 200-acre fruit ranch. We went to work. And I'm very proud of the calluses on my hand. I think more people need to have useful work, and that's why I'm promoting these projects. And I also think with this rail project and the biomass, we need a technology institute to teach the young how to build and maintain infrastructure, because you know, it's a lot more than just sitting on your posterior and pushing buttons on a computer. I mean, the rest of the world is, you know, we're going into the 21st century. We need to be more competitive. We can't have everything, you know, made out of country. We should learn to do more things ourselves in country and appreciate what we have. So, and as far as the marijuana thing, I have some ways of, you know, I think that should be taxed, and I think maybe in some areas where they could have a common greenhouse and everybody would have a locked section that they would be responsible for, and of course the percentage of their crop would help maintain that secure locked greenhouse. Thank you.
Miss Mcguire, now she is from District 1.
Thank you. Challenges for my district that might be different from other districts. It's very rural in some areas. It includes Scotts Flat Road, all of the Banner Mountain areas, all the way down to the bridge below Rawlins Lake. All of Nevada City, which is, you know, a more compact city, all the way down to the South Fork Bridge, Chicago Park, Cedar Ridge. So it's very spread out. Those are part of the challenges. And of course, the marijuana ordinance affects, there's a lot of people, as I'm walking my district in Nevada City, they're living in tight quarters, so it creates special problems there and challenges. And then there's also the very forested areas, which not only for the marijuana ordinances, but also because it can invite criminal activity into that area surrounding the marijuana. The Nevada City areas, it's basically there's dual citizenship with the county and Nevada City, and it's important to promote a good relationship with the city council there and the people doing their work in Nevada City. And we, of course, have this current county courthouse issue going on, which as an attorney, I kind of take a special interest in that as well, and as a lifelong resident. So I think those are the challenges that my district specifically will have to deal with.
And Mr. Beeson, who is the incumbent from District 1.
Thank you. Well, the economy is the overarching issue in the county, but I think you asked district-specific. Fire safety is always a concern in the 1st District. If you look around the topography, that is always something we are concerned about. The wastewater septic issues in California are going to grow, and they're going to affect us, and I've been through some serious issues on wastewater since I've been here. The courthouse and the general health of Nevada City is a real concern of mine. I worry about Nevada City. I live in Nevada City, so I've got a stake in the health of the town, and I'm really concerned about the economy there and how we're going to deal with some of the challenges they face. One thing that doesn't get spoken about much, but in my district we have a pretty high demographic of seniors, and senior services are going to become more and more of an issue, not just in Nevada County, but in California going forward. I don't know if you've ever heard of a study called the Silver Tsunami, but we're going to have to figure out how to deal with folks who are seniors who are living way up in isolated places, and it's going to be a challenge. It may not happen next year, but it's coming. So those are a few of the things I worry about. Fire always, and then as the economy comes back, land use will become an issue again, because in the 1st District there's not much place to put anything, and we get more and more pressure to do things that we wouldn't normally do, and I want to make sure that we keep a good perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Now this will be the first question from the audience, and this has to do with mining. This is interesting because this came up last week at the last forum. Considering the environmental challenges presented by the reopening of the new or former mines, do you believe mining is a viable and desirable activity to promote jobs and economic development in our area? And we start this with Mr. Anderson.
A viable and what activity?
Is it a viable and desirable activity, mining?
I don't think that can be answered yet. My understanding is that the The mine still has to go through the approval process. It has to go, I believe, I could be wrong about this because I'm not fully up to date on what's happened with mines on the west side, but it'll have to go through the California Environmental Quality Act process. And as a result, it'll be vetted, at least with regards to its environmental impacts. In terms of economic viability, that's also that's an issue which may be addressed tangentially within the EIR, but I'm presuming that the investors must believe it's viable, or else they wouldn't be bringing it forward. Whether it's desirable, that's really an issue for the community to decide with regard to the impacts to the area, with regard to the types of jobs created, and with regard to whether it enhances the character of this part of Nevada County or not, and whether it frankly creates additional costs to other parts of the economy. Bottom line is, I don't know the issue that well, so I will stop speaking.
Well, thank you.
You're a gentleman.
Mr. Bluff, what do you feel about mining, and do you think the local government should encourage this through policy and regulation, or?
Well, tomorrow we open the North Star Mine Museum, which I'm a docent, and I only had a few classes at the university in geology. So when I came up here, I volunteered for a working museum. I set up a modern mining exhibit down there, and if I have the honor of becoming supervisor, I will be holding weekly unannounced inspections of the mine, because I used to run water quality at Rancho Seco Nuclear Power Plant, and our water quality was 1 part per billion. You couldn't even taste the water. And those were established specs by the nuclear industry, and also I visited our steam plant when we had one at the geothermal facility up at the geysers, and that's where we removed mercury. And I noticed the lamps in this room, all the energy efficient lamps have mercury in them. So, there are uses, and with the world mineral production now going up, and 7 billion people on this planet trying to live like us, we have to take advantage of what's around us and make sure it's done in an environmentally clean operation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mcguire.
Thank you. There's a number of very stringent regulations, CEQA and a lot of other regulations that apply to mining. Historically, it is what built this community. I had both of my grandfathers working in the mines. And historically, I don't think we can hold people to the same standard as what they, things that were caused, problems that were caused that we now realize by our grandfathers. What we need to look forward to is we do have a lot of regulations that will prevent some of these problems from occurring, hopefully all of the problems, so that it can create a healthy environment. I do understand it will create a very necessary jobs in Nevada County, so that's the positive, viable aspect. I also understand that Nevada County is part of what's called a known 200-mile gold belt. There is a lot of gold under the ground. I also understand that there's a lot of misinformation from both sides, people that strenuously oppose. I would like to get down to a transparent, be honest with each other about really what is going on with the environmental aspects. I think that basically covers my statement.
Thank you. Mr. Beeson.
Well, in the great universe of mineral extraction worldwide, mining is a viable operation. In Nevada County, I don't know. I know there's a mine there's talk of reopening it up in North San Juan. It's not even on my radar. The one that's the most topical is the Idaho, Maryland. And as been mentioned before, the environmental restrictions on that mine are such that if they can get through those, they might be able to open. But my concern as the first district supervisor goes beyond just the idea of mining. I'm worried about the water wells of some of the folks that live in the district up there and how we're going to protect those. That is Nate Beeson's #1 priority, and I'm going to do everything in my legal influence and authority as a supervisor to make sure that if that mine is approved, we have some protocol that delivers water to those folks.
Thank you. Mr. Bianji.
Well, I'll break it down into two different, I'll break the mining down to two different actual actions. The deep rock, solid rock mining, as was mentioned. I do have serious questions about that specifically because we have history as affecting the wells specifically. A lot of the people up on that ridge have had to re-drill because of their wells going dry, had to re-drill deeper. That was actually covered by the last company that was doing that, so that those sorts of mitigation aspects need to be looked at and made sure that they're there. But then the second aspect being our suction mining, gravel suction mining. I think that's something that a conversation can be had about that. I'm curious about a couple aspects of it specifically that may resolve it, but my understanding is that they primarily are cleaning up old mercury waste and gathering it, and that aspect I'm actually okay with. I am for cleaning our environment as much as we can, and if maybe it needs to be made stricter, my understanding is that 98% of the mercury can be reclamated during doing that suction mining. If that isn't enough, I think gathering 98% is really good, but if there's a way to make that better, I'm all for that too. So,
Thank you. We now go back to the media and Mr. Emery from KVMR. And the first person here will be Mr. Bluff.
Yes, the
Both.
Forgive them, Father.
the marijuana cultivation ordinance will be presented again next week to the Nevada County Board of Supervisors. It is estimated that around $200 million comes to Nevada County annually as a result of marijuana cultivation, and at least 150 businesses have signed petitions saying that if the ordinance is too strict, it will severely impact their businesses. My question is, assuming that you have read the ordinance, what changes to the ordinance would you support in the upcoming process? Thank you.
Well, I would, for one thing, people that need it medically, I would permit that. I mean, not me, but I mean, it should be licensed to, if people wanted to grow their own in their own closet at home, and for medicinal use, they could. And the people up in North San Juan, well, that's a big area up there, and my brother has some property up there, and I've experienced some of those people that live up there. So they do their own thing up there, and if they don't have they're not any shootouts or any of that stuff going on, I would let them keep doing their own thing, because the economy is geared to it, is established already. We don't have any viable alternatives for a lot of these people to make a living. And let's face it, in May, a lot of the benefits, the safety net starts running out. So a lot of these people are going to be, either on the street or doing something more creative to earn money. And I would support them being as creative as possible. And myself, I would like to. I've read a book called Harvesting the Wild. It was written by an Indian person, and I think she had it right on. There are a lot of natural remedies that we should be taking advantage of in the woods, and not be so dependent on pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceutical industry has. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie THX 1138. This was a movie where you had to take drugs to survive in the community. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Mcguire.
Thank you. I didn't realize this $200 million, and I would have to. I can't respond to where that amount of money is coming into the community from growing. I'm assuming it's for the people that are working to set up the grow sites and that sort of thing. As we know, it's legally can't be sold. We've had a lot of the criminal element that also comes along with marijuana, and that's the part I'm concerned with. That I know that the district attorney's office will be, and the sheriff's office. That's where their concern comes from. The purpose and intent, of course, of the ordinance was to help people with medical conditions such as people with cancer that have poor appetites, and it helps increase their appetite and that sort of thing. So I certainly wouldn't want to deprive them of that, similar to anyone that's suffering from pain that uses morphine. So, you know, ultimately it would be great if we could have it similar to a pharmacy, where you just, and so at one point I would have supported a dispensary, although I understand that the district attorney is opposed to that, where everyone knows, law enforcement knows where people are picking up their marijuana for special purposes. And, you know, we can have gates around it at night, because we have had robberies up in North San Juan where there was a chase afterwards and someone was killed. So I certainly want to discourage that. But then we have to have respect for the people that are locally. You know, when you're in a tight area such as Nevada City, there's complaints about the smell of growing marijuana. So it's really a tough issue.
Mr. Beeson.
Paul, I'm not surprised you asked that question. We've had several conversations. This ordinance started out as a nuisance ordinance, and it was based on response to public wanting some sort of relief from the odor, lights at night, generators running, comings and goings, dogs of a certain disposition in their neighborhoods. So we looked at a way to try to reduce the nuisance effect, yet provide some sort of a protection for the legitimate medicinal users. And we had the ordinance come to us, and we discussed some changes, and it's going to come back to us again on the 8th, and we'll discuss whether we're going to adopt those changes. But we're trying to find a balance, and it's very difficult. I think it's a no-win probably for the board. I don't know. Somebody's not going to be happy. In fact, maybe everybody's not going to be happy. The economic aspect is almost a moral dilemma, because it's illegal to sell marijuana for profit, yet I'm hearing that businesses are basing a lot of their survival on illegal gain, which that says a lot to me about things. One of the things we need to keep in mind is other counties have really tightened up. Plumas and Yuba have put out a moratorium. Sacramento has banned outdoor grows altogether. And if we don't get something on the ground that works, we're going to get more and more pressure from the community to do tougher and tougher regulations. And I could go on, but thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bianji.
I have read it. And the economy is the elephant in the room. That was a discussion that actually hasn't been held very well. Illegal to sell it, actually, not quite accurate. It's state law does say that we can get compensation for any extra grown, and that is not set in any way. So there is state law that protects that aspect, the economy aspect. So it is there, and I would say that if a local business is not affected in first degree, meaning they're not supplementing their income by doing this, or their employees are not in the second degree, then certainly the businesses are going to be affected in the third degree, and that the customers out there definitely supplement their income in a large way in this community. The problems that I have with the current ordinance, the setbacks were way too harsh, too limited plant restrictions, too small square footage was set aside for indoor mandated registration with the sheriff, which was absolutely unacceptable. Expensive fencing requirements make it prohibitive for people to even attempt their right to grow their own medicine. What I would recommend in participating with the process actually is what I was most disappointed with. I'd recommend that we open this up more with more feedback from the public. I found that we actually could very easily find across the board support from the public when we were trying to write something. It is not an impossibility and can be accomplished easily.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. I'll just note right off that I do not make my decisions prior to a hearing. I would look forward to hearing the public's perspective, as well as staff's perspectives, as well as the perspectives of my fellow supervisors prior to making any decision. So I will not second guess the current board in that regard. It's interesting in the sense that marijuana is the issue of cultivation of marijuana is of actually back to question one, it's of a wholly different character in the Truckee area than it is on the west side. And I won't go into those differences right now, except that the problems we face are nowhere near as intransigent or as critical for the economy as they are on this side of the Sierra Crest. I think Mr. Beeson hit the nail on the head when he noted this started out as a nuisance ordinance, and this is a classic land use planning question. How do you mitigate the impacts coming from a land use which is creating odor issues, which is creating light issues, which is creating noise issues, and also it's creating law enforcement issues. And Mr. Bianji also hit the nail on the head when it comes down to the adequacy of the process. I'm not sure why this needed an urgency, or needed to be termed an urgency ordinance in the first place. It would make more sense to me to take the time to bring the stakeholders and do it properly. With that said, time's up. So.
Thank you. The next question is from the audience, and it's, what do you think will be the most effective in bringing prosperity back to this county? Ms. Mcguire.
I think I addressed that substantially in my opening statements, which is for the board to always consider first the effect that any action they take has on job creators. The county obviously runs off there is no Nevada County without jobs. And so with job creators, we really have to look at local ordinances. And a lot of these things are imposed on us by the state government. However, the details are discretionary and left up to the county for setting policy, such as one of them that I heard from a constituent today was when you're remodeling a house, do you have to use the new standards or the old standards? And there's an aspect of that that says 50 the remodeling versus building a new home. The standards now are much stricter for a new home, so if you're remodeling 50% or less than that, are you going to have to remodel pursuant to the new standards, which substantially increases the value? And I understand right now it's about 50%. If it's a 50% remodel, you have to basically remodel the old home to come to the new standards. And so I think it's really critical to look at that and to also look at permit fees and just the regulations that relate to business to ensure that they are able to stay put and they don't feel forced out of this county to someone that is more friendly.
Mr. Beeson.
First thing I want to say is that we were heavily invested locally in real estate and construction. And what's taken the biggest hit nationwide, real estate and construction. And we'll grow that back. It's going to take a while. Is it going to be like it was? I don't know. Probably not in my lifetime. But it's a serious problem. When you can buy a house cheaper than you can build one, the choice is pretty easy for most folks unless they're building their dream home and they're equity refugees. As far as fees are concerned, Redding, California gave some sort of a fee moratorium, and that money's got to come from somewhere. It comes right out of the general fund. That's where it comes from. And that means the taxpayers are paying the fees that people who are getting the benefit of the fee would otherwise pay. So doing away with fees is a little more complex than one might think. The issue about the 50% requirement for remodels, that relates to fire sprinklers. And this board was very opposed to the imposition of the fire sprinkler requirement by the state. But it's for houses that are damaged in earthquakes and fires, et cetera. It's not a discretionary remodel. And the standard is 50%. There is flexibility. I don't know exactly how far that flexibility goes, but there is some. But nobody likes the fire sprinkler mandate. It drives the cost way up, like my opponent said. But it's a little more narrow than just any house you're remodeling. It has to do with houses that are damaged by natural events.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bianji.
And when I get a chance, I wouldn't mind responding to that.
Oh,
briefly.
okay. Well, then we'll go to your rebuttal now, and then we'll go on to Mr. Bianji.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is...
1.5 minute. A half minute, I mean, half minute.
Right, thank you. My understanding is when you have an existing home and you want to remodel, I really wasn't addressing sprinklers. If you want to remodel, the state regulations require that there's two different things. There's a newly built home, there's a remodel. And if it's a remodel, you don't have to come up to the new standards, whereas if it's a new built home, you have to comply with the new standards that came into effect in 2008. What's happened is the county is the one that has set it at 50%. If it's a 50% remodel, you're going to have to bring it up to the standards that were reset in 2008. Thank you.
Mr. Bianji, now you can respond to the question about what do you think would bring the economy back to this, prosperity back to this county?
Right. Well, that would be falling into my second platform topic of creating a county-owned bank. I think that would be the primary driving force of creating businesses and jobs in our county. What that would do would have a mandate of reinvesting our funds and making the liquid monies available and the access that our businesses and farms and industries need to run. Make it easier for them to get and grow and expand their business, employing more people. That would be it.
Okay. Mr. Anderson.
Oh, I'm sorry to say I have 4 ideas. The first is would be to make sure that the benefits of regulation outweigh the costs of regulation with regard to the formation of small businesses, their retention and their expansion, and also with regard to attracting new business to the area from outside of Nevada County, although quite frankly and pragmatically that's tough to do. Every city and county in California, in fact across the country, is trying to attract new business to its jurisdiction. So, and our locational attributes are a wonderful small town environment and a wonderful natural environment. But that's really about it. We lack high quality transportation access and other concerns. Anyway, number 2, actually ask the business community what their issues are, which goes into issue number 3, or idea number 3, which is to initiate a collaborative effort between local government and local businesses, such as we did in Truckee, which was called Truckee Tomorrow, where we sat down over the course of 3 months and hashed out what the issues were, hashed out ways to deal with it. And we came up with 6 initiatives, which are ongoing right now, and hopefully they'll pay off down the road. And the 4th point is quality of life. People come to this area because of the quality of life, especially in Truckee. People or entrepreneurs come here because of quality of life. CEOs locate here because of quality of life. And if we ignore quality of life, then I'm afraid we're ignoring the critical aspect of what draws businesses to Nevada County.
Thank you. Mr. Bluff.
The rail project that I'm focusing on has a lot of attributes that will help the economy in this area. For instance, we're spending $1 billion a day on imported oil. We're going to do something about it. No more studies. Let's build a backup transportation system. And that rail link that I'm advocating and that I've surveyed and I have on topo sheets from Colfax to Grass Valley in Nevada City, we can use it as collateral to do other things, not only the biomass power plant, the deck over the freeway from Spring Street to Washington Street in downtown Nevada City, because the freeway caused a dead zone on the east side of Nevada City. And once we do things like that, along with building a hippodrome, which is indoor bicycle racing, we can have bicycle racing year-round events. Plus, when we cross the Bear River and the tunnel on the other side for the rail project, we'll have a bicycle right alongside an 8-foot-wide bicycle lane all the way into Colfax. So they'll have the bicyclists will want to come up here because they'll have a safer way of utilizing the space on our roads vis-a-vis the rail project, which will be a dual-purpose project and with natural gas, cable, and water in the same corridor at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go back to the media to Rita Stevens from KNCO. And the first, number one here will be Mr. Beeson.
Thank you. Covering the Board of Supervisors over the years, I've noticed somewhat of a pattern that regulations come down from the state, and examples would be wastewater discharge regulations, state responsibility area fire protection fees, and really a supervisor sitting on a county board of supervisors doesn't have any power to do anything about that. So looking that more regulations might be coming down from the state, as a supervisor representing your district, how would you deal with Sacramento?
With great difficulty. We have methods. I'm on the board of directors of the Regional Council of Rural Counties. We're the advocacy group for rural counties. The California State Association of Counties, that's the advocacy group for all counties. And then there's the League of Cities, obviously, for cities, and there's some others out there. But we do spend a lot of time trying to educate legislators about the impact of their policy decisions on rural counties. California, I think, is getting more of a urban-rural polarization than it used to have, because I think people have an urban mindset. But we do stop a few. I mean, and I wish I'd have brought my notes from the last RCRC meeting, but we stopped 3, we being the rural counties, stopped 3 really ridiculous potential laws from coming down. And I think we're going to win on the septic thing, but that's what we do. And it's tough, because we've got a lot of land mass, but not very many people. Los Angeles County's got more votes in the legislature than all of Northern California, north of San Francisco. But we keep at it, and we win one every now and then. So logic doesn't always apply, though, I can tell you that. Am I through?
Thank you.
I've got more time, eh?
Is your time? Is this time up? You have 10 seconds. No, he's given us this 10 seconds. Okay, Mr. Bianchi.
Thank you very much.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Mr. Bianchi.
I think that primarily the best way to deal with SAC would be to keep open avenues of communication and creating a unified front from the rural counties. So reinforcing our participation and network of support with the rural counties is, I would say, the best way to reinforce what I believe is our local right to local self-governance. So if we want to do things how we want to do things locally, then we need to band together and reassert that right at the people level. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bluff.
What about Anderson?
Oh, yeah. I was so worried about saying his name correctly. I skipped it.
I mean, I don't mind.
Mr. Anderson, I want to hear how you're going to deal with Sacramento.
Well, and you know, I think that, again, Supervisor Beeson has covered the bulk of how to deal with it. You know, lobbying through the California Counties Association, lobbying through the League of California Cities. Truckee actually has hired its own lobbyist, and it's had some benefit for us. So that's a route that's maybe worth exploring also, although, of course, county revenues are tight. So I think we're paying like $24,000 a year for lobbying services. More speculatively, you know, reaching out to the urban legislators, and also maybe in the county budget. You know, another idea is perhaps in each budget note what the anticipated costs to the county are going to be from these regulations, which would hopefully make the electorate aware of what costs are being imposed upon us, and hopefully it would spur controversy and letters to the SACB and letters to the legislators. But it's tough. I mean, how one gets around the mindsets that create some of these laws in the first place is it's tough to deal with.
Thank you. Mr. Bluff.
I would say trying to, organize all the rural counties stronger a stronger league. Also, the Achilles heel for the guys in the South is water. And, you know, we could put stipulations on water and power that leave our area for them. We can, to me, we can put some restrictions where most of the water is kept within our county for ourselves. And forcing those counties in the Bay Area and the LA area to go to desalinization and conservation, which they should have done a long time ago, instead of trying to take more water from us up here. So I'm advocating that, you know, like Mr. Beeson says, is a stronger union of counties and maybe working toward an autonomous, you know, region where we have more of do our own thing without depending on outside resources. I don't know if you've seen the phenomena. One time they had proposed to divide the state into 4 parts. Well, some of that stuff is like the state of Jefferson and the state of Ponderosa and the Bay Area now is, there was an article a while back, the Bay Area counties looking to do their own things. So, you know, those things might be on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mcguire?
Thank you. I agree with what's been said here for the most part. And building relationships with the state, and I appreciate this, we bargain our resources. We have a tremendous amount of resources, timber, water, and minerals in this county, and that may be able to mix into it. The southern areas of the states want our water, and they need to pay for it, and that can be a bargaining chip there with the state. Also, so build relationships with the state, and we do have some leeway. We need to carefully look at that as an attorney. I think that that would be where a great benefit would come from my expertise, is to really look at, you know, is the state limiting us as much as we believe, or are, and can there be some legal challenges to some of the things that they're imposing on counties? That's a strange sound. I just think we have to strategize, get creative, and that's where I think the public comes in. I really appreciate there's a lot of amazing expertise in this county, and I would be looking to that as well as to staff members. One of the, lastly, it continues, someone said basically we need to do our homework as to the costs. It's not going to change overnight. And I think the Citizen of the Year in some magazine was, you know, the picketer. And so I think sometimes that's what local peoples and organizations need to do, is continue to picket Sacramento and say it's not fair, particularly for rural counties. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to questions from the audience. We have 2 questions here that are really on the same subject, but it's a subject that came up in the last election for supervisor. We would appreciate your viewpoint on the recent proposal to outsource the county library to private industry. And then the other one is, what is your stance regarding the outsourcing of the county library system in light of the fact that the Board of Supervisors looked at this option in 2010? And number 1 here is Jedediah Bianji.
Okay, so specifically the library outsourcing aspect, the way that went down is it was going to be outsourced to a company in Florida, I believe it was. They'd be managing it outside our community. Clearly that's a problem in that model. But there are examples of decent ways of outsourcing in our county. There is the county animal shelter has outsourced it's been outsourced to it's not Scooter's Friends, I can't remember, Sammy's Friends, sorry, thank you.
Friends.
And basically a very well-run program. In fact, better than the county was able to run it. Everyone agrees. Cheaper, well, not cheaper in the sense that they are now using volunteers, and it's being the cost is absorbed by the community in that sense. So there are ways to do it, but very specifically, the way it was handled with the library would be completely contrary to the way that I would prefer to keep our calls locally and being able to change what we want locally. Thanks.
Okay. Now, Mr. Anderson, Truckee is in the Nevada County Library System, I believe, is it not?
That's correct. It is, and we do have a library in Truckee.
Okay, so what is your opinion about outsourcing?
Well, I had the pleasure of serving on it's a long name, the Nevada County Library Management Model Ad Hoc Committee. And we were the group which recommended to the Board of Supervisors that they not outsource library management. And as I recollect, there were 3 reasons for that. The first reason was that the shortfall that was being experienced by the library and is still being experienced was seen as something of a short-term problem. It was a result of the downturn in the economy, specifically the downturn in sales taxes, and sales taxes are an important component of the revenue base for the libraries. Another issue was a concern regarding accountability. Would there be adequate accountability to the public if library management was shifted to the private sector or to a private company? And the third was a potential loss of quality of service. Keep in mind that a percentage of the revenue would be going to profit, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it would, we thought, result in a diminution in quality of employees, and therefore quality of service provided to the public. So, and Mr. Beeson may have, I mean, he was the one who actually had to vote on this, so I'm sure he has his perspective, but those were my perspectives on the committee.
Thank you. Mr. Bull.
I believe there's enough expertise in this county, we don't have to outsource anything. And if you outsource, like our nation has outsourced so much now, it's even hard to get a piece of steel anymore that's not made, in some other country that should have been made here. So I'm very much for keeping everything in county among our own people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mcguire.
Yes, and I would agree with Mr. Bolf on that if it is outsourced, in other words, there aren't people, county employees running the library, then it should be other local people, and that can be done by a bid process. It's as a child, I loved going to the county law library, the county library next to the courthouse there. I loved going up those steps, and it's critical to encourage literacy. And my understanding was it wasn't necessarily the previous management that wasn't the problem. It was more some economy issues. So, but it does come down to economics, and I would think that we have sufficient people locally that could provide the service.
Thank you. Mr. Beeson.
Thank you. I was the chairman of the board when this item came to us, and the word was that it was my idea. It wasn't my idea, but there were 4 or 5 options we had, and outsourcing was one of them. But people seized on that and got really worried that that was going to be the board's choice, and we hadn't really made a choice. The ad hoc committee that Mr. Anderson talks about gave us a lot of good input. And when the item came to us, it was clear that the public did not want to consider outsourcing whatsoever. So when the item came to us at the board meeting, the first thing I did was take the outsourcing off the table. And then we looked at other alternatives, and where we are now, we've brought Madeline Helling back on Saturday, which I'm pleased to see. But it's clear the community does not want to outsource its library, and when we haven't. And by the way, what came out of this, the Friends of the Library really stepped up on Doris Foley, and we were really worried about keeping that open even one day a week. And it's a very important asset to our county, and the Friends of the Library stepped up, and they're operating that, and it's just doing fine.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Now we go back to the media, and we have Matt Renda from the union.
Thank you, Polly.
And the first person here will be Mr. Anderson.
So this may be a little blast from the past, but before 2008 and before the economy took a dive, one of the large issues facing Nevada County was the issue of the so-called big box stores. And if I could frame the debate a little bit, the debate was that people are going to patronize these stores, and if they have to drive outside of the county, that's sales tax revenue for other counties. Whereas the other side of the debate said that such stores may compromise the character of this county and also hinder small business operations. So to get to the question, where do you stand? Do you believe big box stores, so-called, belong in Nevada County?
Matt, it's a complex issue. In Truckee, we have said no to big box stores. Our general plan does not allow any retail facility larger than 40,000 square feet. And the reason for that is, for the reasons you mentioned, community character. We want to retain a small mountain town ambiance, which helps draw tourists and vacationers to our community. And we also want to try to ensure that these small businesses that are in Truckee survive, and that they aren't faced with the sort of competition that sometimes happens with big boxes, which is very low prices relative to what's being served by the small retailers. That said, there is a good argument to be made with regard to capturing the leakage of retail sales within a community. And bottom line is, I think it has to be decided on a case-by-case basis. I come from Tuolumne County as a kid, and in Sonora, which is the county seat, there is a big box store, but there's also a relatively thriving downtown area, and now that's serving a much larger market area than I think this part of Nevada County would. But it has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. In Truckee, though, our policy is no big boxes, and frankly, the community should have an important role to play in determining what the policy should be.
Thank you. Mr. Bluff.
You know, French have a saying, vive la différence. I don't think, to maintain and enhance what we have up here, we do not need big box stores because, people, when they come up here from the urbanized area, they come back to a step back in time, a little slower pace, where they're not, they don't see concrete and asphalt block after block. And I think people will appreciate us not having these big box stores locally and maintain our own little character. It might be kind of provincial, but I mean, I like it, Otherwise, I would have stayed in Sacramento. That's what I retired. I retired up here because I look forward to a step back, a little slower pace, and also to be a little more creative in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mcguire?
Yes, thank you. Well, having grown up here all my life, there was a certain time of year when we were starting school and whatever that we had to drive down the hill to get certain items. I think what Mr. Bluff and others have stated, people have moved here for a reason. But I also find that people that have moved from larger cities also are some of the ones promoting the bigger stores. There's the issue of jobs that they could create. I think part of it will definitely come from the business that's involved. Can this area support a large big box store? I'm not so sure about that, and that would have to be looked into. In other words, can they survive? It would be a case-by-case basis. It would provide jobs. However, I'm not necessarily supportive of those because I just don't know that this area can maintain them. I don't think my district, District 1, would be an appropriate place for such a big box store. There may be certain areas that can support it, but, we're so close to Auburn that that's always an issue, and I've heard at times that they were going to put in a Costco, a big box store, that sort of thing. Haven't seen it yet, but that's one of the difficulties we have to contend with, and I do like my small town atmosphere, and I don't mind driving down the hill once in a while for some of those things. But on the other hand, there is jobs, so if there's certain areas of the county that could support something like that, it may be a consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Beeson.
I have this suspicion that if it were a Trader Joe's, it could be as big as you ever imagined. But otherwise, I don't think there's a great amount of enthusiasm. There is what we call sales tax leakage, and every county has it, and rural counties probably have more proportionally than others, and we have sales tax leakage down to North Auburn and over to Marysville. And would putting a big box here arrest that? I don't know. But there's no public clamor for it that I'm aware of. But I think it's something we have to look at through the ERC and the Chambers of Commerce. Would it make the local businesses more competitive? Would it change the mix? Maybe, I don't know. I think I tend to agree with my opponent that we may not have the mass to support one. You know, the internet's probably a bigger threat economically than big box stores, but I won't get into that. So I just wonder, except, you know, from what I hear from certain people, a Trader Joe's would be fine.
Mr. Bianji.
I believe small family businesses built this nation. I think big box stores are sort of the antithesis of that. I've done a lot of local business outreach in the last few months in this process of trying to encourage shopping and spending your money locally and keeping it locally. Gone to Nevada City Chamber of Commerce, Grass Valley Chamber of Commerce, found out that Costco is a member of our Chamber of Commerce in these areas. Went to our local home show here in Nevada County just this weekend. Costco had a booth. I personally think that, yes, jobs can come from them, but they're non-sustainable jobs and often siphon the money outside of our area. I think that encouraging many local small businesses is the best way instead of putting all of our eggs into one basket. If we have one big box store here locally and then it does fail, we'll be in a lot of trouble.
Thank you. Well, the next question will be the first. Mr. Bluff will be the first one to answer on this one. Speaking of the internet, there are federal funds available. This is the question, the statement question. There are federal funds available for expanding affordable high-speed internet to rural areas. What will you, as a Board of Supervisor member, do to bring affordable high-speed internet to Nevada County rural areas? And Mr. Bluff, you're first.
Well, I would encourage competition between companies to see which one would bring the most for the best. I know some of them now that you know, I really resent when they work on the poles. They leave all their garbage down for me to pick up with the lawnmower, and I think they should be a little more conscientious there. But I would encourage them to be a little more competitive in spreading the service throughout the county, and to maximize, because a lot of these people would be, you know, isolated without this connection. And I think it's very important to connect it to the world, because then you know what's going on, and you can realize that, you know, we're in the 21st century, and we've got to be progressive and open in that, and having a good connection, communication-wise, which everybody takes for granted, but really, you know, you have to work at it, is necessary. Thank you.
Ms. Mcguire?
Yes, thank you. I guess it's one of my pet concerns is the strings that are always attached to federal funds. So that, first off, I wanted to state that. I think it's important for us to start developing strategies to keep our taxes local. When they come from Nevada County, they're heading then off. Most of the funds are heading to the federal and state government. So that's one of my projects that I would want to start, is strategies to keep our funds local at the outset and not have to be given back to us with all the strings attached from the federal government. On the other hand, you know, the internet is a crucial area of commerce in this day and age. So without more specifics, you know, it definitely must be considered. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Beeson?
Thank you. This is a constant battle. It's one of our biggest frustrations on the board. About 75% of western Nevada County has access. I think it's a little higher in the East County because Truckey's in a bowl over there. But it comes down to numbers. It comes down to density. And we could get the money from some source to do the capital, but the companies want to make a profit. And if we run something up, way up U-Bet, and some of the roads I've got up there, I don't think we can legally do that. But I think this middle mile thing that I mentioned earlier is going to help a little bit, where we can bring in some broadband, and then we'll have the local providers incrementally expand their networks and provide a cheaper alternative to local people, and also help maybe some of startups who would be able to create some jobs. But we battle this all the time. It's getting that last 25% of folks who are out there in pretty rural areas.
Okay. Mr. Bianchi.
Well, so the public banking idea obviously would help in the infrastructure and building that aspect at an affordable and reasonable rate. How I feel about the internet may be a little bit unique in this aspect. I feel it's a vital aspect of our country, and vital for our country in large, and to maintain our communication. The communication has been an important aspect from the beginning of our country. That's why we have a post office. The post office itself, cheap to deliver post in the city, but expensive rural. But what we did is we flattened that rate out so we can deliver post equally to all the rural and cities at the same time. I actually think that this being a vital aspect of our country, it should be something that looked at by the post office. That's my feeling. I think that the post office itself could be more competitive in offering that aspect, and the vital aspect of our communication is such that it should be taken on by something like that, spreading the cost out equally. Thanks.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Broadband service is a very important tool for economic development. It's critical for businesses looking to move here, critical for entrepreneurs who are looking to start businesses here. It's critical for businesses which currently exist, which are looking to take advantage of the internet. And it also provides very important quality of life benefits. And in essence, I will do whatever I need to do to help the Board of Supervisors expand broadband in Nevada County.
Thank you very much. Well, we actually are at a point here where we are going to go to our final statements, mainly because we have another forum backing up, here at 8 o'clock. And I wish we could have had more questions, but I really appreciate the efforts that we did get here. All right, we will start the closing statements in the opposite order than the opening statements. Now, Mr. Beeson, you were number 5 on the opening statements. No, you were number 1 on the opening statements. And so you will be number 5. Ms. Mcguire will be number 1. And we will go in the reverse order.
Thank you. I'd like to just address that last question, too, a little bit in my closing here. I really want to use the public for the creativity. There are a lot of very educated, very experienced people, a lot of retired people up here that could help us with similar things such as this broadband. The internet is taking a lot of business. We could bring a lot of that sort of business people working out of their homes in Nevada County. So it's really crucial to have the ability to do that. However, grants from the federal government, they make me a little worried and queasy. So I think it's really crucial for the board to look at those kinds of things and to use creative ideas to put the strings back on the federal government, to have some of our own strings based upon the resources we have here. Anyway, I'm very dedicated to this wonderful place we called home. I was born here. I've lived in this community for over 50 years with 6 generations of family. I have well-rounded work experience in this community for nearly 40 years. As I mentioned earlier, I have an insider's view of every sector of business, the private sector as an employee, the public sector as a criminal prosecutor, and I was a self-employed attorney for nearly 20 years. I will do everything I can to encourage a jobs-first policy in all board decisions. I will listen and not be dismissive of the public's ideas, and in fact, I've been collecting signatures, and it looks like my time's up. So I would appreciate your going to my supervisor.com and my Facebook page, and I have campaign materials up front. Would appreciate your vote in June. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolt, your closing statement.
Well, if I have the honor, again, if I have the honor of being elected supervisor, I believe in putting people to work and also building infrastructure and cutting through a lot of red tape to get it done, because time is our worst enemy in what's evolving in the world today. I mean, there's potential war situations overseas that will affect us, believe it or not. And when you drive your car with 30,000 parts in it, and there's a little more impact about maintaining the logistics of that car rather than just the energy to run it. And I'm going to try to, as a supervisor, encourage outside interests to invest in this area to help us build our infrastructure. In fact, I've been going down to San Francisco to a consulate and talking to them about investment, and they've come up to my house, and they're very much interested in partnering with us. But the partnering would be like 51% ownership locally and 49% from the outside. That's a stipulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
I'd like to thank the League for holding this forum, and thank you also for coming this evening. To summarize, I have three overarching objectives. The first is to protect the natural, historical, and scenic resources that form the foundation of our economy. The second is to improve our lives and those of our neighbors through growth in business and employment opportunities and through the cost-effective provision of county services. And third is to ensure county government listens to the public and operates in a manner that is inclusive, collaborative, transparent, and fair. You can find more detail regarding my goals, my background, and my philosophy of governance at voteforrichard.com, and I would very much appreciate your support and your vote if you're from District 5. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bianji.
First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the event and everybody that's here. Local democracy needs participation. And thank you for all the people that have expressed support and encouragement to me while I've been doing this, and especially my wife and family who have seen too little of me of late. Why am I writing a write-in campaign? I believe minimal amounts of money and time should be spent in campaigning. I believe our system of government suffers today from the standard of lengthy campaign periods. A capped amount of money should be used by all qualified candidates for a 1 to 2 month campaign period. This would help limit and control the obscene amounts of nonprofit and corporate money that is currently flooding the election process. I also know that running as a write-in, I need to capture you with fresh ideas and solutions to the problems we're facing in Nevada County. I hope you agree with me when I say defending against big government and big corporate control, helping small businesses by establishing a county bank and instituting a foreclosure moratorium are those topics. The answer to these issues for our founding fathers then and for us now is to demand our right to local self-governance and encourage the prosperous growth of our economy by protecting our locally based businesses and farms. For more information on my topics, you can go to Bianji for supervisor.com, or you can ask me questions after the event. I'll be here till they turn the lights out. If you like my topics and you're not in my district, talk to these guys. Thanks.
Mr. Beeson.
Thank you. In case I run out of time, please visit my website. It's natebeason.com, natebeason.com. You'll learn more than my mother ever wanted you to know about me. You've heard us, and by the way, thank you to the League again and to all you folks for taking the time to coming out here and listening to us. And you heard us say why we're running, and we've presented our qualifications, and we've answered the same questions, and now the question is for you, based on what you've seen tonight, who's the best qualified to represent the 1st District on the Board of Supervisors? I think that my commitment to this community is well known. This is my home. I don't think anybody that knows me and has watched us over the years has any doubt about that. I have a practical side that I try to balance with the visionary aspects of life, because the practical side is that's the bread and butter in a local government, and these jobs are not getting easier. I've proven that I don't shy away from tough issues. I shoot straight with my constituents, and I make decisions based on the merits. If you've been a naval officer for 30 years, you internalize that. It's hard to make political decisions. I work hard. I'm fair-minded. I'm the only candidate endorsed by the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the Sheriff's Management Association, and the State Regional Firefighters Association. I think that says a lot about my commitment to Nevada County. I'm also endorsed by the Citizens for Highway 49 Safety. I think the choice is clear. I would appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think we all ought to thank these people for coming out here tonight. I want to thank the audience and the media participants for their questions and the league members who assisted here tonight. Now, we do have another forum coming up within 5 minutes, so we got to move around and get up and do whatever you have to do. But remember, the important thing is to vote. Thank you. Good evening. We're now going to have our second forum, which is for the Superior Court Judge in Nevada County. And you see them sitting right in front of you, Tom Anderson and George Smirnos. I will remind you, if you weren't here for the first forum, real quickly. Well, first of all, we have 4 members of the media there. Pasquale from UBNet, Rita Stevens from KNCO, Paul Emery from KVMR, and there's a different representative from the union. This is Liz Keller from the union. The ground rules here are the same, except we only have 2 candidates instead of 5, but they will speak on a rotational basis. They drew numbers, and they're sitting in 1 and 2. And the closing statements will be in the reverse. Mr. Anderson will give the first closing statement. The candidates will have 2 minutes for opening statements, followed by questions from the media and the audience. And if you have a question and you have a card, write it on the card and just hold it up, and Ms. Williamson will pick it up. Okay? They may request an additional 30 minutes if they want to. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. As you can tell, I've been here too long tonight. It seems like 30 minutes, but it's really 30 seconds. They have 30 seconds for a rebuttal, and if they have a rebuttal and the other wants to respond, he may. Everyone gets equal time. They will have 1.5 minutes for their closing statements. And finally, again, we ask you, if you feel spontaneous and want to applaud, just hold it until it's all over with, and then you can applaud as you like. All right, we will get it started with the opening statements. Number 1 is George Say your name again.
Smirnos.
Smirnos. I've had a lot of trouble with names tonight. So you have to
That's all right.
George Smirnos.
Smirnos.
Okay. All right. Well, you may begin.
All right. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having the providing this opportunity for a forum for this campaign. There are 4 basic reasons why I'm running for Superior Court Judge here in Nevada County. And the first of those is to hold the convicted offenders accountable for their crimes. I know that most people in Nevada County are law-abiding citizens and don't usually end up in court, but I want to make it clear that what I'm talking about tonight are those individuals who choose to violate the law and choose to make victims out of the citizens of this county. There needs to be real consequences for those individuals so they have a motive and an incentive to change their behavior and to have the community be a safer place. The second reason is I want to set public safety as a top priority on the bench here in Nevada County. The current bail schedule, for example, is, I believe, woefully inadequate in that it deals with, it sets bail, presumptive bail for certain crimes that are committed, and the defendant has to post bail in order to be released. Some of those crimes involve the drugs methamphetamine, and it's required under state law that when a Superior Court develops a bail schedule, that they address quantity of the drug to enhance the bail. That's not happening here in Nevada County. Bail for possession of methamphetamine for sale, for example, is $35,000 across the board, whether it's a quarter an ounce, a pound, 2 pounds, 5 pounds. That's not acceptable. The third reason is I want to ensure that the victims of crimes in this county have a say in court, that they have their rights recognized in court. I don't believe that's happening right now in Nevada County. And the fourth reason is I want to restore balance to the bench. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. First, a few facts about me. Just historically, I've been working in the courtrooms for about 3 decades. The last 5 years, I've had the honor of being Nevada County Superior Court judge. And I began my law career first going to night law school, working during the day, worked as a private practitioner for many years, some years as a government lawyer, working as a public defender for Nevada County before going on the bench, being elected in 2006. As a judge, I make my focus principally on fairness, integrity, respect, and keeping politics out of the courtroom. In each and every case that comes before me, my emphasis on the facts of that case, the law, and the Constitution of the State of California, United States of America. Nothing else. I'm not going to consider public opinion or political winds, strictly on the facts and the law of that case. My family and I live and work in Nevada County. I have 2 teenage daughters and my wife. We're active in the community. We love living here. So the welfare of this community is always preeminent in my mind. Just a quick few examples of some of the successes or achievements of my 5 years and change on the bench so far. I'm really proud of the success of our problem-solving courts. For example, the 80% success rate of our adult drug court compared to the 70% failure rate for those people sent to prison. And these programs have results because we hold the defendants accountable, and we do follow-up, and it works. I helped implement Laura's Law in Nevada County, and we actively enforced Marcy's Law, and victims have a say in my courtroom. I created a mediation program for folks without lawyers. We've successfully addressed a lot of these issues, and we need to move forward.
Thank you. We'll now start with the questions. We'll start with the media, and Pasquale, you're number 1. And the first, Mr. Anderson, you would answer this. You would be the first to answer.
Could you tell us a little bit about what, in your opinion, are the challenges that Nevada County Superior Court is facing?
Sure. Well, over the next coming years, our biggest problem, of course, is budget. We have to do more with less, and that's critical because we have these successes that have lowered recidivism rates, and we need to maintain those in spite of reducing budgets. It's a major issue, and currently, as the elected PJ for the court, it is one that weighs heavily on my mind, but we're making some progress in maintaining the fact that these courts will continue. Obviously, as the presiding judge for Nevada County Superior Court, being the representative of the courts and an elected representative of the community, the location of the future courthouse is very critical. We've been working on this for 3 years now. It took quite a while to get the state to recognize the need to keep it on its current site, but it's a problem that's lingering, as you know, from the recent press of the status of that building. And every day, the primary challenge is to simply to face each case treat it uniquely, without bias, without any presumed or presumptive intent on how to decide the case, but base it on the facts and the law of that case.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smiros?
The same question?
Yes.
Well, I believe the biggest challenge facing the Superior Court in Nevada County is the Criminal Justice Realignment Act that went into effect on October 1st of last year. What's happened now is that the county jail has, in essence, become the state prison for inmates sentenced to prison for over 500 felony offenses. Those offenders who are designated as falling under the Penal Code Section 1170 Parent H have to serve their county jail, their state prison sentences in county jail now. That's going to create a huge burden on the court. It's going to create a huge burden on the facility, the detention facilities in the jail. As a result of this enactment, there will be reduced supervision of convicted felony offenders. In some cases, there will be no supervision of convicted felony offenders. They'll serve their county jail time as a prison sentence, be released into the community without any sort of supervision. No parole officer, no probation officer. This is going to create, I believe, a huge problem unless it's addressed in a manner that includes taking the public safety into consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll go to the first question from the audience here. Recidivism is a big concern and very costly. What types of programs do you support to battle recidivism? And the first one here would be Mr. Smaras.
Recidivism is, I think, best dealt with by deterrence, by holding someone accountable for their actions. We have, in Nevada County and elsewhere, special courts that deal with individuals who have certain problems, mental health courts. There's a drug court for those individuals who are motivated to succeed. But the question is, how do we deal with those individuals who find themselves in a position where they have failed drug court, they have no incentive to succeed? Unless they're dealt with in a manner that involves deterrence and accountability, those individuals, I think, will continue to reoffend. And when they reoffend, they not only harm themselves, they lead themselves down a path that leads to self-destruction. They also harm the community and continue to victimize the community. So I think recidivism is best dealt with in terms of the special courts as well as accountability for those offenders.
Mr. Anderson.
Well, that is true. Our collaborative courts, or I like to refer to them as our problem-solving courts, have been very successful in dealing with the issue of recidivism. That is, that the people who successfully complete these programs have an amazing rate of success, meaning they don't reoffend after they graduate. I use as an example our adult drug court, which has an 80% success rate, compared to 70% failure rate of our state prison system, meaning that those people who come out of prison fail at the rate of 70%, meaning they're reoffending, they're committing new crimes. So it's a question of where do you balance? Where do you put your money? Where do you put your focus? Stopping people from committing crimes when they're done with their sentence, or just giving them new tools to do that. One of the things I want to address about something that was commented on before, which is realignment, is in fact, because we've had this experience with the success of our drug courts, we have in fact, through realignment, created programs, a day treatment program, which requires those people coming out of prison, or some of those who we let out of jail while they're still serving their prison sentence in county jail have a day treatment program where we have to report every day, and they have to come in and deal with those issues that motivated their getting involved in crime in the first place. So we are working every day on these programs, trying to improve them, trying to expand them, because our goal is to reduce recidivism in Nevada County as best as we can. And that's what we do.
Rebuttal, please.
Yes.
Now, the fact of the matter is that if 80% who graduate from drug court don't reoffend, or at least are not rearrested within 2 years, what about the remaining 20% who do? And I believe that when those individuals come back into court after having been arrested, they should not be patted on the back and sent back outside into the community like a revolving door through probation violations. I think we see that all the time.
That's incorrect, and they do go to jail. They go to prison.
Are you through, Mr.
Yes.
Okay. And you want 30 seconds to rebut this? Yes, all right.
I'll take the rest of my remaining 20. I already used up 10. When someone fails adult drug court, they go to prison. That is the agreement they make when they come into the program. Accountability is one of the key factors of the success of that program.
Okay. We'll now go back to the media and Paul Emery from KVMR.
Sure.
And Mr. Anderson, you're first on this one.
This country has the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Two questions. Why do you think this is true? And secondly, should we build more prisons?
Well, why do I think that's true? Well, I think the way our country has gone politically over the last several decades is the reason why we started incarcerating a lot of people. We fought a war on drugs. It was declared a war. It was an abject failure, unfortunately, because it didn't reduce crime and it didn't get people off of drugs. But we tried it for decades, which is why now, over the last decade, when we started working with problem-solving courts, we've discovered there's a better way to approach these that protects the community much more thoroughly than the previous method ever did. I mean, it's not a cure for everything and all the ills, but at least we found something that works and makes a positive difference. And as far as building more prisons, that's the governor and legislators' job to make that decision, and I think they spoke. Realignment, they're closing down prisons because of realignment, shifting the burden to the counties, and those are the factors we've already started to address.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker.
I believe that the reason we have a higher incarceration rate is because of the breakdown of the family unit. If our society were to focus more on the family values, the difference between right and wrong, and if we raised our children to respect others' property, to respect themselves, I believe in my heart that we would not have this high incarceration rate that we do have. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Unfortunately, our society has this, as a whole, I think, has gone downhill to the point where now anything goes. It's not uncommon for children to grow up in families, in home environments where drug use is common, where disrespect is common. And what we find as those kids grow up, that they become like their parents in terms of drug abuse, in terms of property crimes. I believe that's the reason why we have the high incarceration rate. And I do believe that the construction of additional facilities is best left to the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a question from the audience now. I understand that judges rotate assignments. There's a good chance you will be hearing civil cases. What experience do you have in this important area? And you, Mr. Smiros, are first on this one.
I have very little experience in civil cases. The only experience I have has been in the past dealing with asset forfeiture in drug cases. The Superior Court is, with rotating assignments, involves different assignments. And I know that for me, there will be a learning curve involved. Just like when a civil attorney is appointed or takes the bench, there's a learning curve involved in dealing with criminal law. So I'll face that challenge. I'll take it on. I'll work hard. I'll learn everything everything I need to know in order to carry out that assignment.
Well, it's a little unfair question because for the 3 years I've been on the bench, I was the principal civil judge for Nevada County. So I heard all types of civil matters on a daily basis for 3 years. In addition, while serving as a judge, we all have all types of cases. So even though right now I'm a felony judge, I do hear some civil cases and an occasional family law case. While you're sitting, you do a little bit of everything. Prior to being a judge, some of my qualifications were, having been in private practice, I was a general practitioner, mostly did criminal defense work and litigation, but I did have civil cases. I was a small business advisor. I also served as a judge pro tem for a number of years in San Francisco and Contra Costa counties, so I heard small claims mostly. And I was also an administrative law judge for the state of California on a pro tem basis. So that sort of helped round out my civil experience before I went on the bench.
Thank you. Back to the media and KNCO, Rita Stevens.
I hope you will appreciate my humor here. Carl F. Bryan Jr., when he was a serving judge, I'm told, that when two attorneys in a case were going after each other, the judge would tell the bailiff to go get the 2 boxes. And he would have the boxes presented, filled with dirt, and then he would say, now I will add water so that when you sling mud, you can really sling mud at each other. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it brings to mind the role that judges play in controlling the attorneys before them. What would be your techniques in the courtroom?
Mr. Anderson, you're first on this one.
Okay, thank you. Well, the technique I principally rely on in controlling my courtroom, whether it's a civil or criminal, starts with respect. I believe that when you show respect to people, no matter how nervous, upset, angry they are when they come inside the courtroom, and many people are, because it's a foreign area for most people. Most people don't spend much time in court. That's up to district attorneys and public defenders mostly, who are in there a lot. But I found that if you let them know they're going to have their say, they're going to have a fair day in court, they tend to control themselves. They tend to want to make sure they get their message out. And it's worked for me so far. I've never had to have anybody taken out of court for contempt so far in my 5+ years on the bench. It's very difficult for people coming into the court. They're at a loss for all the different ways that things work. What's the proper procedures, the forms they have to fill out, the rules of evidence that they're supposed to apply with when they're not represented by an attorney. And attorneys actually are the same thing. If they're respected, if they know they're going to have their voice is going to be heard fairly, they tend to abide by the decorum one expects in the courtroom. And that's been my experience in my years on the bench before, when I was a pro tem, and since I've been on the Superior Court for Nevada County.
Mr. Smiros.
Well, I've been in the courtroom for about 26 years, and I have seen many situations where attorneys have treated the court with disrespect. They've treated each other with disrespect. And I believe, from my observations of certain judges that I highly respect, that that kind of activity was not tolerated and should not be tolerated. And that the first time that an individual attorney shows signs of being disrespectful or of becoming aggressive or showing any type of animosity towards other attorneys or court personnel or witnesses, I believe the judge needs to step in and shut that down immediately.
Thank you. Next question from the audience. Hypothetically, in a judgment against a pedophile, under what circumstances would you sentence such a person to jail time versus probation? And Mr. Smeros, you're first on this one.
That would depend on the complete facts of the case, probation officer's report. If they're going to be sentenced to county jail, then they're going to be on probation to begin with. And it would depend on the charges that are brought, and it would depend on the plea agreement that's been submitted to the court by both the prosecution and defense. As a judge, I would have the ability to, if the plea agreement calls for the possibility of probation and jail sentence instead of state prison, I would have the authority to reject that plea agreement if I thought it was not in the best interests of the defendant and the community, and I would do that. I can, as I sit here, not conceive of a situation where I would grant probation to a pedophile if the charges were as serious as they were made out to be in the complaint and in the facts of the case.
Mr. Anderson.
Well, obviously, that's a question that can't be answered generally. Each case has to be decided strictly on its own merits. So to say when one would occur or the other is dependent on so many factors. The reality is of sentencing on a case like this is that one of the sentencing criteria in determining between probation and parole is community safety. And so that's always one of the considerations you have to take into account. You also should take into account the victim. What is in the best interest of the victim, and what does the victim want? Not that the victim's desire is a controlling factor. That's not necessarily it, but they must have their say, and the court's obligated to consider the victim's perspective in the sentencing whenever the victim wishes to speak. And we try to enforce that as much as possible in all cases. So you have to look at these realistically, weigh all the factors, and make the best decision you can. And sometimes the decision is something that you personally may not like. But a judge cannot use their own personal feelings to decide what the appropriate sentence should be in any case. So you're faced with deciding the case and the appropriate sentence on the facts of that case and the law.
Thank you. We go now to the union and Liz Keller. And Mr. Anderson, you're first on this one.
Okay, sorry about that. It seems that there's a, I don't want to call it, well, I'll call it a rising tide of petty crime that maybe isn't necessarily being handled as well as it could be by the courts. Public drunkenness, public urination. Is there a better way for the local courts to handle those kind of issues?
Well, I'm not, to be honest, exactly sure what you're talking about, because the court is not a law enforcement agency per se. That's the job of the police and then the district attorney's office. There are issues recently brought up and I think maybe what you're talking about is in downtown Grass Valley, Nevada City, the quality of life crimes, as I refer to them, which is the blocking the sidewalks, the littering, the public drunkenness, the interfering with, citizens trying to go down and shop, those type of things. And they come to court, and the procedure had always been, because they're labeled citations, if the person doesn't show up, the matter was sent to collections department. And that doesn't help law enforcement on the street, because the people that are most likely to get those tickets really are immune to worrying about debt collectors and bad credit ratings. So the fact that they get another ding on their credit history for not paying a fine doesn't really bother them. So I organized a meeting last week with the judges and the chief of police for Nevada City to talk about the issue of whether or not there's a way to change that procedure and make it so that these crimes can be treated in a different manner. So we're in the process actually of discussing that now to see if we can make an improvement and make it more effective. But in terms of how they arrest people and how they're charged, that's not the court's job.
Mr. Smirnos.
Yeah, I think shoplifting, trespassing, public drunkenness in the downtown areas should be vigorously addressed by the court. These are misdemeanor crimes. The court has the authority to place individuals who are charged and found guilty of these crimes on probation, informal probation. The result of these crimes is that the business owners in these downtown communities are struggling. They're already struggling with a poor economy. And when you have the kind of activity that we just spoke of taking place in businesses, in shops, in doorways, areas where customers come into the business, and they're driven away. And it's harming the business, it's harming the community, it's harming the city because of the lack of revenue. We've seen businesses close down because of this. And I think treating this criminal activity lightly sends the wrong message. And the results can be seen in the decreased business activity and the detriment of the local economy. So the best way to prevent, I believe, this type of petty crime is to impose sentencing decisions on these convicted offenders. They're misdemeanors, but they're still serious to the business owners. And the sentence, the probation, which will establish a firm line between that past conduct that got him in trouble in the first place and the potential for future criminal conduct. So in other words, probation conditions, suspending jail time if necessary, and that will help deter others as well as the individual himself. Thank you.
Ms. Short.
You would like your 30-second rebuttal?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I'll try to use less. It's not the court's decision whether or not a crime is charged as a misdemeanor. That's up to the charging agency. And most of these offenses, fortunately or unfortunately, that are bothering the downtown merchants are mostly treated as citations by the law enforcement agencies. And part of that is because of the city ordinances, the way they're written. And those are matters that are going to be taken up actually in the very near future to try to see if there's a better way to handle these.
Do you want any more time on that, Mr. Stearns?
Yeah. When you get a citation for a misdemeanor, the crime's still a misdemeanor, and the court still has the authority to put somebody on probation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question would be from the audience. How would the concept of restorative justice influence your sentencing decision for a convicted felony defendant? And you are first, Mr. Spearman.
Well, my decision on sentencing a convicted felony defendant would involve considerations of public safety, considerations of what the defendant has done, what he has earned in terms of a jail sentence or a prison commitment. And restorative justice, I believe, is not is not a factor in determining what sentencing should be. Victims have rights, and when a victim has been brought into the court system involuntarily by someone's decision to commit a crime, I might add, that individual, that victim, has an absolute right to appear in court at all proceedings, not just sentencing, to be advised of the progress of the case, to have input on bail, to have input on release from custody, to have input on protective orders. And in that sense, getting the victim involved in the case, I think, is sufficient to address the restorative justice issue. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Again, the concept in general, restorative justice, often refers to helping to make the victim whole, and by victim I mean not only the individual who is the target or subject of the crime that's at question, but it's also the neighborhood and the community where that crime occurred and it affects, because every crime has sort of a ripple effect. It affects not only the immediate victim, but it affects those around the victim. It affects those in the community. So they all have to be they're all taken into consideration in essence, because every sentence, as we've all pointed out, community safety is one of the major factors that we have to consider. So, but what this also speaks to is when the sentence is over, what is available for the victim to have a better sense of feeling whole. And part of that, from my experience in some several major cases over the past decade, has been to make sure that the victims understand the process as they go through it, so they don't get frustrated by going court appearance after court appearance and not knowing what's going on, but making sure the victims have a true understanding of the whole process. Then when the case is over, oftentimes in certain cases there's the opportunity for maybe a victim and the defendant maybe at some point to at least recognize each other in some respect. A lot of that is making sure that the defendant is paying restitution, for example, that he's giving back, what he did in his crime.
Okay, thank you. Now we're back to the media, and Pasquale, we're back to you. Question.
Let's go back to the courthouse and the location, and with the latest coming down from the AOC saying that Nevada County Courthouse is now under reassessment and possible renovation is now an option. What are your feelings about it, and can the courthouse actually be effectively renovated so that both safety and also ease of work can be assured?
Mr. Anderson, you're first on this.
Okay. Well, I've been working on the part of the courthouse committee and the local project advisory group for the past 3 years, and I can only speak for my observations, and those really aren't really relevant because I represent the court on that committee. I do know that the architectural firm that was hired to design the new courthouse, when and if they ever get the go-ahead, was precluded from contributing possible designs and doing their initial investigation into the building and what their options are. And part of that is the frustration of state bureaucracy, because even though answering those questions would help take the next step more obvious and sort of commonsensical, they're not allowed to start designing until the state finally makes a firm decision on what the location of the courthouse is going to be. So it's a very problem area for the state, because they're trying to make this assessment without doing the work that they need to do before they can effectively make that assessment. We do know that the building, the historic building, the old part of the building, the oldest part I should say, since they're both really old now, it was built in like 1857, And it's the same interior walls that were built then. When they did the modification in 1931 or 33 and put the deco cover on it, they left the same walls up. So those are the core of our problems.
Mr. Smith.
If the courthouse can be rehabilitated and improved at its present location, I say go for it.
Very good. Thank you. Back to the audience. This will be your number one on this one. How will you work with the neutral third-party mediators in the courtroom?
Well, not having a lot of experience in family law, I believe that's where that question's coming from, I would think. I am, as I said earlier, I'm willing to take on whatever learning curve I need to take on in order to be an effective judge. If a third-party mediator is neutral, then I'm going to treat that individual with respect. I'm going to ensure that all parties to the mediation have their rights recognized, that proper rules and procedures are followed, and that everybody will have the opportunity to be heard, and any decisions resulting from those discussions will take into consideration everyone's points of view.
Thank you. Yeah, third-party mediators are used in family law, but when I took over the civil department, I initiated a program bringing in third-party neutrals to assist in other civil areas, especially high conflict areas like people seeking temporary restraining orders against their neighbors or family members, and also in eviction matters, things that are very highly contentious. And I found that by bringing in mediators, we were able to provide a forum for these folks to come together and have an opportunity to resolve their matters in a way where they both felt that they had a contribution to the solution. And in fact, we've had great assistance from the volunteer mediators from the local conflict resolution center who's provided the mediators for this purpose. So what it was able to do is resolve almost 90% of these cases resolved by mediation instead of having an adversarial hearing in the courtroom. And what that does is allows these folks to be able to resolve these matters, vent their feelings, and be able to work through it with the help of the mediator to resolve these issues. It's been a great help to the court to reduce the amount of hearings that would come before the judge, and some of these hearings could take up a really long time. But because they're resolved now by using mediation, it's been able to be really effective and efficient at the same time.
Thank you. Back to the media in KVMR, Paul Emery.
Do we have enough courts and judges to handle the caseloads in a timely manner?
Mr. Anderson, you're first.
Well, as the presiding judge, I would say we could use a little bit more help. But we're doing our best to get the job done with the staff we have. The real problem actually isn't as much with the number of judges right now, it's with court staff, because as anybody knows or can figure out, you know, it's the clerks that do the heavy lifting all day and have to process everything that goes on. So whatever a judge says in the courtroom, a court clerk has to not only take it down, but make it happen. Put it in the record. If there's orders that have to be sent out, they have to be sent out. Different agencies have to be notified, the police, CPS, whatever it is. So, and what we've happened in the last 4 years, we've lost $500,000 of our little court budget. And it's impacted, we've lost 13 staff. And as you can imagine, in a small court like ours, 13 bodies is a lot of bodies. And that means the existing clerks have to pick up that burden and still get the work done with less. So more judges is not the solution right now. We need more staff. We need our budget back.
Mr. Spearnose.
Yeah, I think the current number of judges and courtrooms are adequate. I believe that if the courts would handle cases in a timely manner, require the attorneys who come into court to be prepared, and the judge himself to be prepared, that will result in less continuances in court. I've had conversations with attorneys and court personnel dealing with essentially cases being continued unnecessarily for weeks on end. And every time that happens, the calendar gets congested, parties are inconvenienced, it's more costly for the attorneys, or to pay the attorneys to come into court for individuals who have retained counsel. And that's one way, I think, of resolving or using the existing resources, is to deal with the cases when they come to court and stop continuing the cases. There's an article in the Union from September 16th of last year. There was a case on the calendar involving a sentencing issue, or actually a motion to suppress. The case had been continued 4 times because the judge in that case, after doing a lot of research, this is a quote, "I changed my mind, then I changed my mind again. I don't have an opinion for you today." So by dealing with these cases when they come on the calendar and not continuing the cases unnecessarily, I think that would go a long ways towards moving the caseload along.
Rebuttal, please.
Rebuttal, 30 seconds.
The judges that work in Nevada County work extremely hard. There's not one of them that works less than almost probably at least 50 hours to 60 hours a week. And it's a hard-working crew. Nothing is done thoughtlessly or foolishly or without reason.
Thank you. Did you want to make any further statement?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, back to our audience. And if you are, and this will be Mr. Smirnos, you will be first on this one. If you are elected or re-elected, what are your goals for the next 6 years?
My goals for the next 6 years are to see a reduction in the amount of street crime, to see a reduction in the number of arrests for methamphetamine. When we moved to this county 25 years ago, my wife and I moved here so we'd have a decent place to raise our family, and it was. When I was the deputy district attorney here in the early 90s, it was. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. You can open up the Union newspaper any day of the week and read about methamphetamine arrests, drugs, guns and weapons. April 25th, 4 arrested at a search of a residence for possession of controlled substance, methamphetamine. April 6th, Nevada City man arrested on statutory rape and methamphetamine charges. April 4th, 3 arrested in a drug bust, one of them a 17-year-old boy, methamphetamine again, 128 grams of methamphetamine. And it goes on and on. Any day of the week, you can open up the paper and read about this problem we're having. It's a cancer. Methamphetamine is a cancer, and it's destroying this community. And my goal would be to hold offenders accountable, to make sure that those individuals who are placed on probation for these types of crimes follow the rules of probation. If they violate probation, they're going to know that there's going to be a consequence instead of getting reinstated over and over again and continuing to get released out into the community.
Mr. Anderson.
Over the next term of office, I think my first focus would be to keep what's working. That is, to continue to seek solutions to enhance programs that have been proven to be very effective in reducing recidivism and helping people get back into the community in a positive manner. In other words, help make our community safer using these programs. We do face a dilemma with realignment issues, and with that, we have to continue to find ways to expand what we're already doing to address more people. Because they are effective, we need to increase that effectiveness. But we also want to continue to work on other matters. I mean, judges don't just do criminal matters. We have, most citizens come to court for civil matters. They come in because it's a small claims matter, it's unlawful detainer, they have a dispute, and we have to make sure that we keep access to available to those folks. With the reduction in budget, a lot of courts around the state are eliminating certain areas that they're providing timely service for. They're cutting down on small claims, they're cutting down on civil filings, and they're putting their emphasis on trying to prosecute only serious crimes. We can't do that in Nevada County. We depend on our court to be a place where people can resolve disputes, not just prosecute. Obviously, criminal prosecutions, safety is utmost importance, but we're really lucky in Nevada County. As Chair Froyle has said, we have a really low crime rate, and there's a reason for that. We have a diligent law enforcement agencies in town who are doing their job.
Thank you. Now, back to the media and KNCO, Rita Stevens.
In Nevada County, we've implemented what's known as Laura's Law, and I believe we are still the only county in the state that's actually enacted it. Do you think that Laura's Law is effective, and are there any problems being the only county that has implemented it?
You are first.
Okay. Well, yes. Laura's Law has proven to be incredibly effective. Laura's Law is designed ostensibly to help those people with severe mental illness who are in danger of becoming forcibly hospitalized, and they have a history of hospitalizations or arrest as a result of their mental illness. Laura's Law allows someone to be reached out, intervened, to try to get them to accept services voluntarily if at all possible, and brought to court if necessary. And what we've shown is by having Laura's Law, everybody that we reach out to, 2/3 of them accept services without having to be brought to court. And those that come to court, almost all of them eventually accept services. And what this does is, first of all, it gives the families of these folks some hope that they can, their family, their loved ones will not have suffer the trauma that they would otherwise suffer if they ended up being 5150, which is the term for forcibly hospitalized after they become a danger to themselves or others. So we reach out in that manner, but also significantly is the amount of money it saves the county, because the costs of forced hospitalization is huge. And we found that for every dollar we invest in a Laura's Law case, we get back $1.81, and so it's immensely successful.
Mr. Spiros.
Yes, I think it's probably successful for the individuals who have been subject to Laura's Law. My understanding is that the county actually enacted the program in 2008, although the legislation was enacted in 2002. The county became a participant in 2008. And since 2008, 4 individuals, I believe, have been subject to the Laura's Law provisions here in Nevada County. It's has not been adopted by any other county in the state, but I think that it should. Just from our own experience in our own extended family, we've seen situations where the provisions of Laura's Law would have been extremely beneficial. It's up for a extension in front of the legislature right now, and it's my hope that the legislature will extend Laura's Law an additional 6 years.
I'll use my
Okay, 30 seconds.
not really a rebuttal, but a clarification. Laura's Law has been activated for 40 people in the last time we've had it in place. There's only been 4 contested hearings. There's been 15 court cases revolve around that, but only 4 ended up being contested. And Nevada County's implementation of Laura's Law, which is also referred to as assisted outpatient treatment, received a state and a national award in the last 2 years.
Thank you. Do you have any further comment on that, Mr. Sabrino?
No, thank you.
Thank you. That pretty much winds up our questions. We do have the closing area that we're still going to deal with, and they have 1.5 minutes for a closing statement, and Mr. Anderson, you are first.
All right. Well, I'm certain I haven't answered all of your questions in the short time in the short hour that we've had together, but I'll be around if you have any questions to ask me, and you can always go to my website, judgetomanderson.com. But I've served as a judge for the past 5+ years. I've worked hard. I've helped create some successes in our problems, especially dealing with recidivism, addiction, and mental health issues, and solving some access and resolving issues in civil matters as well. Because a judge does more than just sentence people. There's a lot to the job, and I think I've proven over my time on the bench that I have the qualities, the experience, and the skills necessary to do a good job. I'm committed to keeping politics, bias out of a decision-making process. Every case that comes before me, I focus on the facts of that case and the law and the Constitution, and that's it. We cannot have politics involved in making of a decision. I also am proud that I've received the endorsements of the current sitting judges, the retired judges in Nevada County, and most of the presiding judges and other judges throughout Northern California. That makes me very proud because judges in other counties don't endorse needlessly or purposelessly. They've seen my work, they've seen me as a judge, they've seen me as a presiding judge, and so I really thank them for their endorsements.
Mr. Spirinos.
Thank you. I believe that a judge has to do everything that he can do to improve the quality of life in the community. And from the evidence that's before us every day in the newspapers, out on the street, the harm that's being done to our children, the harm that's being done to our community, our families, by the increase in crime, the increase in drug use, I think is extremely detrimental. So I believe the judge must do everything he or she can to prevent someone from reoffending. If someone is convicted and placed on probation in my court, I will impose a sentence that will guarantee that that individual, if that person violates probation, that they will have the opportunity to realize the consequences of their violation. I cannot comprehend, I don't want to see anyone continue to violate probation, to continue to break the law and drive themselves down that path of self-destruction. And that's what's happening on these repeated offenders who continue to violate probation. It's not good for the individual, it's not good for the community, it's not good for public safety. If I will do my part to help revise the bail schedule in Nevada County to bring it up to the requirements of the penal code. Because as it stands now, the bail schedule is woefully inadequate and does not address the issues that it's designed to address. The number one priority for bail is public safety, and I will ensure that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the League, I want to thank the candidates not only for running, but for coming here tonight. I want to thank the audience and the media participants for their questions and the League members who assisted here tonight. As they both indicated, they are going to be around.
Change the channel! Change the channel! Make a sound! Share the echo and show the world your face. It is your right to seek. It is your right to receive. It is your right to impart. The doors of public